All right, so we're diving into Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's all about OKRs, objectives and key results. And I gotta say, when I first heard about this whole OKR thing, I was like, whoa, this is hardcore. Like, is this really for mere mortals like me? But as I got deeper into it, I realized it's not just for those Silicon Valley superstars.
Yeah, you're not alone there. A lot of people hear OKRs and think, oh, that's just for tech giants. But the funny thing is, they came about from, well, necessity, really.
Exactly. And it all started back at Intel, right? With Andy Grove, no less. The story in the book about Operation Crush, that's when Intel was going head to head with Motorola. Man, that one blew me away. They set this crazy goal of getting 2,000 design wins for their 8086 chip.
And that right there, that's the perfect example of what Doerr calls a stretch goal.
Mhm.
Like something so ambitious, it kind of makes you sweat a little. But that's the point, right? To push beyond what you think is possible.
And the kicker is they actually blew past that goal, over 2,300 design wins. So it goes to show aiming high can really pay off.
It's not even just about hitting the numbers, although that's obviously nice. It's about what happens along the way. That drive, the creativity, the innovation that comes from pushing your limits.
Okay, so we've got these audacious goals, but then Doerr takes this whole OKR thing to Google, and I have to ask, you read that part about the 17 slides, only two with numbers? What was that about?
I think it speaks to the confidence Larry Page had. Remember, he projected $10 billion in revenue, not market cap.
Hmm.
That's thinking big and backing it up.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But even with Google's insane growth, 7 products with over 1 billion users each, how did OKRs help manage all that? It's mind-boggling.
It boils down to finding that balance between top-down alignment and bottom-up ownership. Top-down means making sure everyone's moving in the same direction, like having a shared compass.
Gotcha, so everyone's on the same page with the big picture. But what about the bottom-up part? How does that work?
That's where the teams come in. They get to define their own key results within that larger framework. That way, they feel a sense of ownership over their work, which, let's be honest, makes all the difference.
So it's like you've got the company's North Star, but the teams get to chart their own course. That's brilliant.
Exactly. And it just makes sense, right? When people feel ownership, they're more invested in the outcome.
Speaking of feeling lost, have you felt like that in your own work? Like you're just spinning your wheels, not sure where you fit in the grand scheme of things?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there.
That's where OKRs can be a game changer. They bring that much needed clarity and direction. Instead of getting bogged down in the day to day, you can see how your work contributes to something bigger. It's actually pretty empowering when you think about it. And the thing is, this whole OKR thing, it's not just for, tech companies or whatever. I mean, Doder talks about the Gates Foundation using OKRs. The Gates Foundation.
Right. You wouldn't necessarily think of it, but even philanthropy, maybe especially philanthropy, needs clear goals to make a real impact. Patty Stonesifer, she was the CEO, she brought OKRs in to bring some structure to these huge, ambitious goals they had.
Yeah, because it's like, how do you even begin to measure something like eradicating malaria?
Exactly. And that's where OKRs can be really powerful. So take their fight against malaria, right? At first, their goal was to totally wipe it out by 2015. Super ambitious, but they looked at the data, really assessed the situation and realized, okay, 2040 is a more realistic target. And it's not about setting a goal and then stubbornly sticking to it no matter what. It's about being honest, learning, and adapting as you go.
Right, like course correcting along the way. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Remember that story in the book about the yam seeds? They managed to double the production, hit that target, but it turned out nobody actually wanted to use the yams because they took forever to cook. It's a good reminder that hitting the number isn't everything. It's about the impact, the real world results.
Okay, that's a great point. So speaking of impact, let's jump over to a totally different world for a sec.
Yeah.
YouTube. Doerr talks about how Susan Wojcicki, the CEO, set this insane goal. 1 billion hours of daily watch time. 1 billion. That's just, how is that even possible?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, right? Even within Google, people thought it was crazy ambitious. Christos Goudreau, he's the engineer who got tasked with that particular OKR.
Yeah.
He was understandably a little freaked out, but also super motivated,
Yeah.
It pushed everyone to think bigger, be bolder in their approach.
Oh, I bet. I'd be worried about breaking the internet with that much watch time. But seriously, how did they do it?
It was a multi-year thing, a lot of trial and error, constant analysis. But one of the key things was they really focused on user experience above all else. They even got rid of a lot of the clickbaity type videos.
Really? Even though those probably drove a ton of views.
Yep. It might have seemed counterintuitive in the short term, but they took the hit because ultimately They knew it would lead to a better experience for users in the long run.
So it's about being willing to make tough calls, even if they don't seem immediately obviously beneficial, if it means staying true to that bigger vision.
Exactly. And that takes courage, for sure. But when you have everyone on board, all aligned around those shared goals, that's when the magic happens.
Totally. And speaking of everyone being on board, we've been talking a lot about transparency and how crucial that is for OKRs to work. But what does that look like in practice?
Well, it's about making sure everyone has access to the information they need at all levels. Doer talks about Zoom Pizza, right? Where
Hmm.
everyone, the engineers, the pizza chefs, everyone could see the company's top OKRs. Now imagine that kind of radical transparency within your own team or workplace.
Right. No more silos, everyone working together towards a shared understanding of what's important. I can see how that would be powerful.
It's about fostering trust
Yeah.
and shared ownership, right? And when
Uh-huh.
people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, when they can see how their work contributes to the bigger picture,
Hmm.
well, that's when they're truly engaged.
It's funny, we've talked a lot about the positive impact of OKRs, but is there a downside? Like all this focus on goals and numbers, doesn't that create a sort of pressure cooker environment? I mean, it sounds kind of intense.
I get it. It's a common concern. But here's the thing. When implemented thoughtfully, OKRs can actually lead to a healthier work environment.
Really? How so?
Well, think of it as shifting from a culture of like blame and judgment to one of learning and continuous improvement. It's not about pointing fingers when things go wrong, but about asking, okay, what happened? What can we learn from this? How can we do better next time?
So it's less about like individual performance and more about collective growth.
Exactly. Doer gives that great example of Adobe, how they ditched their annual performance reviews, which, let's be honest, nobody enjoys, and switched to a system of continuous feedback and growth conversations.
Interesting. So how does that tie into OKRs?
It's all about creating a culture of open communication and ongoing development, right? OKRs provide a natural framework for that. Instead of these once-a-year high-pressure evaluations, you have regular check-ins, feedback loops, where people can get the support and guidance they need to grow and develop. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels safe to take risks, to experiment, and, yes, to even fail sometimes. Because that's how we learn and ultimately how we achieve those big, audacious goals.
Okay, so we've seen how OKRs can help with focus, alignment, even like reshaping company culture, right?
Right.
Pretty impressive stuff, but I gotta be honest, when I first started digging into this whole OKR thing, I was a little skeptical, I thought, here we go again, another corporate buzzword. Am I the only one?
Oh, no, totally. It's natural to be a little skeptical at first, for sure.
Huh.
But the proof is in the pudding, right? When you actually see OKRs in action, when they're done well, when there's real commitment, top to bottom, the impact is huge. It's undeniable.
The story in the book that really got me was the one about the marketing director at Zoom Pizza. You remember that one? They were totally resistant to OKRs at first, but then they became like the biggest advocate. What changed for them?
I think it was like this aha moment for them. They realized OKRs aren't about, just hitting some arbitrary target someone else set for you. It's really about connecting your everyday work, your actions, with what you value, what the company values. It brings this whole other level of meaning to your work.
So less about checking things off a list and more about feeling like you're actually making a difference.
Exactly. It's about creating a work environment where everyone, no matter where they are in the company, feels that sense of ownership. They understand how their work contributes to something bigger.
It's funny you say that about it not just being a corporate thing. I remember earlier you were saying something about how OKRs could be used outside of work.
Yeah, totally. Imagine if we apply this framework beyond the office. What if schools used OKRs to help students set goals? Or governments use them to tackle, these big social problems? It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
Now, that is a thought-provoking idea. It really makes you think about OKRs in a whole new light, doesn't it? It's not about like selling more widgets or whatever. It's about making real progress toward something meaningful, whatever that is for you.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, measure what matters. It's not just a how-to guide for setting goals, right? It's about creating a better future, one objective at a time. And that's something I think we can all get behind, don't you think?
100%. This has been a fascinating deep dive. I know I've learned a lot. So if you're listening, we want to hear from you. How can you use OKRs, these ideas in your own life, your own work? What matters to you? Hit us up on social media. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, remember, keep those goals in sight and keep striving for what matters.